Rain lashed against the windshield like 1,000 whispers trying to warn her to turn back. The coastal road curved sharply, its slick surface illuminated only by brief flashes of lightning that revealed cliffs plunging into dark, churning waves below. Elena Rivera gripped the steering wheel tighter, her pulse steady despite the storm. She had worked in war zones, trauma wards, disaster sites. Fear wasn't new to her, but something about this assignment carried a weight she couldn't name. The iron gates of the Vale estate loomed ahead, tall enough to block out the storm's fury. As they creaked open under the guard's watchful eyes, her headlights swept across a long driveway lined with dead trees and a mansion that rose from the cliff like a relic of another century. Stone, iron, silence. The kind of silence that felt alive. When she stepped out of the car, rain drenched her instantly, soaking through her coat. The butler who met her at the door was a gaunt man whose posture suggested he'd long forgotten what warmth felt like. "Miss Rivera?" he said, voice gravelly. "Mr. Vale is expecting you. Follow me." The foyer swallowed her in dim light and expensive emptiness. Everything gleamed, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, but the air was cold, as if the house itself mourned. Her shoes echoed as she walked, the sound sharp and unwelcome. Along the hallway, portraits of stoic ancestors stared down from gilt frames. None smiled. In her bag lay the medical file she'd received that morning. Half the pages were blacked out. No diagnosis, no surgical details. Just one cryptic note from the consulting physician. Severe trauma, both physical and psychological. Handle with discretion. Rumors had filled the blanks. A yacht explosion, a fiancé dead. Injuries that had left Damian Vale unable to walk, unable to love, unable to touch. The butler stopped before a set of tall double doors. "Mr. Vale prefers privacy," he said quietly, as if even the walls might be listening. "You'll find him inside." Then he withdrew, leaving Elena alone in the flickering corridor. She drew a breath, squared her shoulders, and pushed open the doors. The room beyond was vast, its walls lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the storm-tossed sea. Curtains shifted like restless ghosts in the wind, a faint scent of antiseptic mixed with salt air. Her eyes adjusted to the dimness, tracing the shapes within. A fireplace long gone cold, a half-empty glass of whiskey on a table, and a grand four-poster bed untouched. And then she saw him. Damian Vale. He was not in the bed. He was standing by the mirror. Tall, broad-shouldered, barefoot on the polished floor, his reflection watched her long before he turned. The lightning illuminated the planes of his face, a mixture of strength and exhaustion, the kind of beauty that seemed carved rather than born. His shirt hung open at the collar, revealing faint scars along his chest. Scars that told stories no medical report ever could. "You're late," he said, his voice deep and precise, like every word had to fight its way past something broken. "The storm slowed me," she replied, keeping her tone calm, professional. "Storms tend to do that," he murmured, eyes flicking over her as if assessing more than her credentials. "They remind us how fragile control really is." Elena opened her bag and took out her stethoscope. "I'm here to help, Mr. Vale. I'll need to assess your condition and living environment before establishing a plan." He gave a low, humorless laugh. "You think I need saving? Your file suggested as much." His expression hardened, and for a heartbeat, lightning flashed again, revealing the raw grief that lived behind his composure. "My file tells stories written by people who didn't understand the truth." "And what's the truth?" He met her gaze in the mirror, his reflection closer than his real self, that some wounds don't belong to the body. The wind howled against the glass, thunder rolling so close it rattled the chandelier. She stepped closer, close enough to see the tremor in his hand, the smallest betrayal of the calm he fought to maintain. "Then let me help with the ones that do," she said softly. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement maybe, or warning. "Be careful, Nurse Rivera. Every healer thinks they can save the cursed, until the curse touches them." He turned fully then, facing her for the first time. The storm's reflection danced in his eyes like firelight. Elena's breath caught, not from fear, but from the strange electric awareness that passed between them. She'd expected a patient. Instead, She'd found a man who looked like he'd been waiting for her arrival long before either of them knew it. "Welcome to my prison," Damian said quietly. "Let's see if you're strong enough to survive it." And as thunder shook the cliffs below, Elena realized with chilling certainty that this was not going to be a medical assignment. It was going to be a reckoning. The next morning broke with a sky that still wept from the night before. Waves crashed against the cliffs below, their sound echoing through the marble halls like a memory refusing to die. Elena woke in the east wing, where her new quarters faced the endless sea. The curtains fluttered in the cold wind, carrying a faint scent of salt and whiskey that somehow belonged to Damian Vale. She dressed quickly, her nerves steady, but her heart uncooperative. The mansion was too quiet, its silence heavy, as if the walls remembered screams that had once filled them. Every hallway she walked felt like an echo of something forbidden. Portraits followed her with their painted eyes, and the marble floors beneath her feet seemed colder than stone should be. The butler appeared as if conjured from the shadows, bowing stiffly. "Mr. Vale requests breakfast in the study," he said, avoiding her gaze. When she entered the study, Damian sat near the window overlooking the sea, his back straight, his hands clasped as if carved from restraint. Morning light struck his face in half, one side calm, the other shadowed. He didn't turn when she entered. "You don't sleep much," she said softly. "I don't need to," he replied. "Sleep makes men remember." Elena noticed the untouched tray beside him. Fruit, eggs, untouched coffee. "You're not eating." "I'm not hungry." "Then I'll sit here until you are," she said, folding her arms. He turned, amusement flickering briefly in his eyes. "You're persistent, Nurse Rivera. I'm paid to keep you alive. And what if I don't wish to be kept?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "Then you hired the wrong nurse." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the ocean's roar. Finally, he reached for the coffee cup. His hand trembled slightly, just enough for her to see. He noticed her noticing. He set the cup down sharply, as though the act of being observed was unbearable. She stepped closer, scanning the movement of his shoulders, the tension coiled in every muscle. "Those tremors? You're still healing." He gave a soft, humorless laugh. "You think this is about healing, isn't it?" "No, it's about punishment." Before she could ask what he meant, a distant sound carried through the hall. A door creaking open, then slamming shut. Damian's expression shifted from composed to sharp in an instant. He stood faster than a man with his supposed condition should have been able to. "Stay here," he ordered. But Elena followed anyway. The sound came from a corridor branching off toward a heavy oak door sealed with rusted bolts. She remembered what the butler had said the night before. There was a wing she must never enter. Damian reached the door first, pressing his palm against it as though steadying himself. For a heartbeat, she saw his reflection in the polished wood, eyes dark, haunted, afraid. "What's in there?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "If you value your job, Miss Rivera, don't ever open this door." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. Not command, not anger, fear. When he turned back to her, his face was unreadable again. "You'll find the medical equipment in my bedroom," he said. "That's where you'll conduct all assessments from now on." "In your bedroom?" she repeated, uncertain. "Yes, that way I can make sure you don't wander." Her breath caught slightly. It wasn't a threat. It was control masquerading as safety. Still, she nodded. That evening, she carried the monitoring equipment to his room. The lights were dim, the air heavy with the faint scent of cedar and something darker, pain maybe, or memory. He stood by the fireplace, sleeves rolled up, watching the flames. His scars glowed faintly in the orange light. She adjusted the machines quietly. The silence between them was fragile, like glass stretched too thin. When she reached for his wrist to attach the pulse sensor, his body went rigid. His eyes met hers, guarded, electric. "You're shaking," she said softly. "And you're too close," he replied. "Proximity doesn't kill, Mr. Vale." His jaw tightened. "It has before." Her hand lingered longer than it should have. His pulse beneath her fingers was fast, too fast for a man who claimed detachment. For a moment, neither of them moved. The storm outside had calmed, but another one had taken root in the silence between them. When she looked up again, she realized he was no longer watching the fire. He was watching her reflection in the mirror across the room, the same way he had the night before. It was then she understood. Damian Vale didn't just fear being touched. He feared what might happen if he wanted it again. And though she didn't know why yet, she felt it in her bones. Something in that forbidden wing, in that locked door, was the reason he lived like a ghost among the living. The house whispered its secrets in the wind, and Elena knew one thing with absolute certainty. She hadn't come here to nurse a patient back to health. She had walked straight into a story that would break them both before it healed them. Rain returned that night heavier than before, and the sound of it against the windows felt almost rhythmic, like the house itself was breathing through the storm. Elena could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Damian standing by that locked door, his expression torn between fury and fear. She rose from bed, wrapped her shawl tighter, and stepped into the corridor. The mansion slept, except for the occasional whisper of wind sneaking through cracks in the old walls. As she walked, she passed the portraits again, but now they seemed different, less like decorations and more like witnesses. Their painted eyes watched her as she made her way toward the west corridor, where the forbidden wing began. Something about that place drew her as if curiosity were a physical thread pulling her closer. She stopped before the sealed door, her heart steady but curious. From the other side came a faint mechanical hum, a sound too regular to be the storm. It rose and fell in a rhythm that reminded her of medical equipment. Before she could listen closer, a voice spoke behind her. "Couldn't sleep either, Nurse Rivera?" She turned sharply. Damian stood in the shadows, dressed in a dark shirt sleeves, rolled-up eyes, half hidden by the dim light. He looked less like a patient, and more like a man carved from sleeplessness itself. "I heard something," she said. "It sounds like a generator." "It's nothing that concerns you," he replied, stepping closer until she could see the lines of exhaustion etched into his face. "This part of the house is off limits for a reason. I'm your nurse. Everything that affects you concerns me." For a moment he said nothing, then his voice softened. "You're braver than I thought. Bravery has nothing to do with it. You hired me to heal you. I can't do that if you keep secrets." His jaw flexed, but his gaze softened just enough for her to see pain beneath the armor. "You assume I want to be healed?" She took a step toward him. "You wouldn't have called me if you didn't." The lightning illuminated his profile for a heartbeat. The scar along his jaw shimmered like silver lightning itself. He sighed, turned the lock on the forbidden door, then faced her again. "Some wounds reopen when touched. Remember that before you decide how deep you want to go," he walked away, leaving the lock gleaming wet with rainwater from his hand. The next morning, Elena reviewed his medical. Scans again, the ones that had arrived in a sealed envelope from the private hospital. Something was wrong. The images didn't match his current symptoms. The notes referenced nerve damage that wasn't visible. Someone had falsified these records. Later that day, she found Damian in the sunroom staring out at the ocean, his posture rigid, his cane resting unused by the chair. "I need to discuss your test results," she said. He didn't turn. "You've been busy. They're inconsistent. The scans were edited." He gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "Of course they were. The truth doesn't look good on paper." "Tell me what happened that night, Damian." He looked at her finally, his eyes hollow, yet burning. "You think you want the truth, but it doesn't heal people. It ruins them." "Then ruin me," she whispered. He stood so suddenly that the chair scraped against the marble. "My fiancé died in that wing. The fire started in the lab she built to cure me. I wasn't injured saving her. I was injured running away." Her breath caught. Running away from what? From her madness, from mine, from what we tried to make possible. He stopped himself as though he had already said too much. His hand trembled again, but not from pain this time, from memory. "I don't believe you're beyond help," she said gently. He laughed quietly, the sound hollow. Everyone who ever said that ended up regretting it. Before she could respond, thunder boomed, shaking the windows. The lights flickered. Damian's face paled. He whispered something under his breath, a name perhaps, but the storm drowned it out. Then the alarm blared from the corridor, the same one linked to the forbidden wing. Damian froze for a second, then ran faster than she thought he could. She followed through the dark hall, her heartbeat syncing with the alarm. When they reached the door, the lock had been broken from inside. The hum she had heard the night before was gone, replaced by silence so heavy it made her ears ring. Damian stepped inside first, and she followed. The room was filled with charred remnants of machines, the smell of smoke faint but unmistakable. In the center stood a single photograph, framed but cracked, a woman in a white lab coat smiling at Damian. The name on the bottom corner read Isabella Vale. Elena looked at him and saw his expression collapse, the man of steel suddenly human again. "She built this room to fix me," he whispered. "Instead, she destroyed everything." He turned toward the fire's blackened marks on the wall, his voice trembling like a confession. "And every night I hear her screaming, 'Still.'" Elena stepped forward, ready to reach for him, but stopped when he whispered the final words that chilled her more than the storm outside. "She wasn't trying to kill me that night. She was trying to finish what she started." The following morning arrived under a sky the color of ash, the sea calm yet restless, as though waiting for something to break. Elena stood on the balcony of her room, staring at the horizon, thinking about what Damian had said the night before. Every word, every tremor in his voice carried secrets she could almost feel under her skin. The fire, the woman, the unfinished experiment, it all hung in the air like smoke that refused to fade. When she went down for breakfast, the house felt even emptier than usual. The staff moved like shadows, avoiding eye contact, their footsteps careful and silent. She noticed the burned smell still lingering faintly near the forbidden wing, though the doors were now sealed again. The butler approached her with his usual quiet presence. "Mr. Vale is in the garden," he said. "He asked for you." Elena followed the narrow path leading to the cliffs behind the mansion. There, Damian stood, his dark coat whipping in the wind, his gaze locked on the horizon. The sunlight caught the scar along his temple, making it glint like a mark of fate. "You shouldn't stand so close to the edge," she said, her voice steady against the roar of the ocean. He smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. Maybe that's the only way to feel alive. Or maybe it's the easiest way to forget. He turned toward her, his eyes sharp. "You think I'm suicidal, Nurse Rivera?" "I think you're haunted, and I think you're tired of pretending otherwise." The wind tore through the silence between them. Then he spoke softly. "The fire didn't just take her, it took everything I believed in. She was building something that could rewire human emotion, heal trauma, erase pain. But the moment we tried it on me, something went wrong. She said I would never feel desire again, that I'd be trapped between numbness and guilt forever." Elena's breath caught as understanding began to form. "That's why they said you were unable to be with a woman." He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "It was easier to let the world believe I was broken than to admit what really happened. Because if she was right, then the man I used to be died with her." He walked past her toward the greenhouse, the glass walls fogged from within. "Come," he said without looking back. Inside, the air was thick and humid, filled with the scent of damp earth and decay. Plants grew wild around medical equipment that looked out of place among the vines. Monitors lay beneath a layer of dust, syringes gleamed under the filtered sunlight. "This is where she worked," he said quietly. "After the fire, I rebuilt it exactly as it was. A reminder of what I destroyed." Elena moved closer to one of the tables, scanning the notes scattered there. Equations, diagrams, sketches of the human brain, and one phrase repeated over and over in shaky handwriting: "Emotion reset protocol." "She was experimenting on you," Elena whispered. "She said it would save me from grief. Instead, it took everything else." He turned toward her, his voice raw. "You want to help me? Then tell me how to feel again." For the first time, Elena saw the depth of his suffering, not just as pain, but as absence. She reached out slowly, placing her hand on his wrist. His body stiffened, but he didn't pull away. "You're already feeling," she said softly. "You're just afraid to name it." His eyes searched hers, uncertain, vulnerable. Then something flickered in them, like the first spark of life breaking through ruin. But before she could speak again, a crash echoed from the far end of the greenhouse. The glass door had shattered inward. Both turned toward the sound. A shadow moved beyond the mist, someone running through the rain toward the mansion. Damian grabbed her hand instinctively, pulling her close. His pulse beat fast under her palm, faster than fear should allow. "Stay behind me," he ordered. They stepped outside, but whoever had broken in was gone. The door to the forbidden wing now hung open again, swaying gently in the wind. Damian's voice dropped to a whisper. No one should know how to get through that lock. Elena looked at him, her heart pounding. Then someone inside this house does. That night, the mansion fell into tense silence. Damian paced the study while Elena sat near the fire, reviewing Isabella's old files that she had secretly taken from the greenhouse. One line stood out more than the rest, a patient identifier. That wasn't Damian's name, but his own. Handwriting. He had tested the procedure on himself long before the fire. Elena looked up and realized Damian was watching her from the corner of the room, his eyes unreadable. "You found it," he said quietly. "Now you know why the fire started. What did you do, Damian?" He took a step closer, the firelight catching the fear in his face. "I didn't start the fire to destroy her work. I started it to stop myself." She stared at him, unable to speak. He continued, his voice low and trembling. "The experiment didn't kill my ability to feel. It magnified it. Every emotion became unbearable. Desire, pain, guilt, they fused until I couldn't tell them apart. I wasn't afraid of being numb, Elena. I was afraid of feeling too much." Outside, thunder rolled again, shaking the windows. And for the first time since she arrived, she saw tears gather in his eyes. Elena stepped forward, slowly ignoring the fear in her chest, and whispered the words that would change everything between them. "Then let me be the one who teaches you how to feel without burning." He looked at her as if those words were the first light he had seen in years. But in the reflection of the window behind him, a figure moved just beyond the glass, watching them both from the darkness. The next day began with fog rolling in from the sea, thick enough to blur the line between sky and water. The mansion stood silent, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Elena barely slept, haunted by the image of that shadow. Outside the window, every creak of the old floorboards made her heart race. Every flicker of light in the hallway felt like a warning. When she entered Damian's study, he was already there, standing by the window in the same dark shirt from the night before. His reflection was ghostly in the glass, his expression unreadable. "You saw it too, didn't you?" she asked quietly. He didn't turn. "The figure outside, yes," he said, his tone flat. "I told the guards to search the grounds. No one was found. But whoever it was, they knew this house better than I do." Elena walked to the desk where she had left the files from the greenhouse. "Someone broke into the wing twice now, and both times only after I found something new. That's not coincidence, Damian. Someone's trying to stop us." His eyes darkened. "Or warn us." Before she could reply, the butler entered, holding a silver tray with 2 letters. One was for Damian, sealed with a black wax emblem. The other bore no name, just a symbol burned into the envelope, an infinity loop crossed with fire. Damian's face went pale when he saw it. He dismissed the butler and tore it open, reading quickly. His jaw tightened as his hand trembled slightly. Then he looked up and said in a voice she almost didn't recognize, "She's alive." Elena froze. "Who? Isabella?" Her breath caught. "But you said she died in the fire." "I thought she did. The report said they found her body burned beyond recognition. But this letter, this handwriting, it's hers." He handed it to her. The message was short. "You stopped the experiment, but you didn't end it. Meet me where it began." Elena's pulse quickened. "Where it began, the greenhouse." He shook his head. "No, earlier, before the fire. Before she changed everything. There was another lab off the coast beneath the cliffs. We buried it after the explosion. It's supposed to be sealed shut." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then we go there." Damian hesitated. "You don't understand. If she's alive, then she's not the same woman I knew. The experiment consumed her mind. She wanted to reshape human emotion by erasing pain completely. She believed love was a disease. Elena met his, gaze unflinching. Then we'll find her before she finishes what she started. That night, they prepared to descend the cliffs to the hidden lab. The wind screamed through the rocks, and waves crashed below. But Damian's determination was colder than the sea. He moved with focus, his limp barely visible. Now adrenaline replacing pain. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a crumbling stone archway, sealed with rusted chains. Damian broke them open with a crowbar, and they stepped into the dark passage. The smell of salt and metal filled the air. The deeper they went, the colder it grew. Elena's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing walls covered with faded equations, scrawled in Isabella's handwriting. The words spoke of emotion, thresholds, and neural synchronization. And at the bottom of one page, a chilling phrase, "Love equals control." They reached a chamber filled with broken machinery. The floor was blackened from old fire damage, yet in the center stood something new. Glass pod glowing faintly with blue light. Inside was a chair surrounded by electrodes and sensors. It looked like a medical throne. "This wasn't here before," Damian whispered. "Someone rebuilt it." Elena stepped closer, studying the screens, flickering weakly with data. "She's been here recently. The system's still warm." Suddenly a voice echoed through the chamber, low, calm, familiar. "You shouldn't have come back, Damian." They turned toward the sound. A woman stood near the key, shadows her face half hidden by the light of the monitors. Her skin pale, her eyes sharp as glass. The resemblance to the photo in Damian's drawer was undeniable. "Isabella," he breathed. She smiled, but it wasn't the smile of memory. It was a mask. "You look alive." "I'm impressed you were supposed to die when I did." Elena instinctively stepped in front of Damian. "You wrote the letter you wanted him here, why?" "To finish what he ruined," Isabella said, her tone calm yet venomous. "The world deserves freedom from pain. I gave him that gift once, and he destroyed it." Damian's voice broke through the silence. "You took everything from me. I gave you evolution," she hissed. "You were the first proof that emotion could be rewritten, but you were weak. You fell in love and burned it all." She stepped closer, her eyes now fixed on Elena. "And you, nurse, are the infection. He feels again because of you. That cannot continue." Before either of them could move, the machinery behind her roared to life. Sparks flew, the pod's lights flaring bright. Isabella reached for a switch, shouting, "You can't save him twice!" Damian grabbed Elena, pulling her back as the pod exploded, sending shards of glass flying. The shockwave threw them to the ground. The last thing Elena saw before darkness swallowed her was Isabella's silhouette, vanishing into the firelight, whispering, "Love was never meant to survive." When Elena woke the next morning, the mansion was eerily quiet. The sun had returned, but Damian was gone. Only a trail of ash led from the cliffs down toward the sea, and a single message carved into the stone near the garden. "If I don't come back, remember the heart always remembers, even when the mind forgets." The waves were louder that morning, their thunder rising against the cliffs as if the ocean itself was calling out the name she refused to speak. Elena searched every inch of the mansion for Damian, but found only silence. Every door she opened revealed nothing but dust and echoes. He had vanished without a trace, leaving behind the faint scent of smoke and the whisper of his last message carved into stone. She refused to believe he was gone. Not after what she had seen in that underground chamber. Isabella was alive, which meant Damian might still be too driven by instinct. She returned to the cliffs, her boots sinking into the wet earth. The storm had washed away most of the footprints, but one set remained leading toward the broken tunnel entrance. Inside, the air was damp and metallic, the same smell that had clung to her clothes the night of the explosion. She moved cautiously, flashlight trembling in her hand. The walls seemed to breathe shadows pulsing with memories of what had happened there. Then she saw it, a trail of blood leading deeper into the dark. Her heart pounded faster. Damian was here, wounded and alive. She followed the trail until it ended in the same chamber where Isabella's machine had stood. The pod was destroyed, blackened wires twisted like vines, but in the corner, half buried under fallen debris, Damian lay unconscious, his shirt torn, his skin marked by cuts and burns. Yet he was breathing. Elena rushed to him, her hands shaking as she checked his pulse. When he stirred, she almost cried with relief. His eyes opened slowly, confused, distant, then focused on her. "I told you not to follow," he rasped. "I told you not to die," she whispered. He gave a faint smile, even through the pain. "Seems neither of us listens well." As she helped him sit up, he winced, clutching his side. "She escaped," he said. "She took the data from the machine. She's going to finish the experiment somewhere else." "Where?" He looked at her, then beyond, her as though seeing something invisible. "There's another facility in the city. She built it before the fire under one of my companies disguised as a research lab. If she activates that system, it won't just affect one person. It'll affect everyone she can reach." Elena's breath caught. "She wants to erase emotion from humanity." He nodded grimly. "And she'll succeed unless we stop her." They made their way back to the surface, the sun breaking through the clouds for the first time in days, but its light felt sharp, almost cruel. Damian leaned on her as they walked, his strength fading, yet his resolve fierce. He wasn't the broken man she had first met. The darkness inside him had transformed into purpose. By evening they reached the city. The Vale Research Tower rose above the skyline, glass walls, reflecting the dying light of sunset. It looked like progress, but inside, Elena could feel something unnatural. Humming beneath the surface, security was abandoned. The building seemed empty until they reached the top floor where faint light spilled under a steel door. Damian paused, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the handle. "Once we go in, there's no turning back," he said. "Then let's not turn back," she replied. Inside, the lab rows of monitors flickered with code and heart rate patterns. Every screen pulsed with the same phrase looping endlessly. "The cure for pain is the death of feeling." At the center of the room stood Isabella, her white coat smeared with soot, her eyes glowing with feverish brilliance. "You shouldn't have come back, Damian," she said, her voice calm but chilling. "You were the proof and the failure." Damian stepped forward despite the weakness in his legs. "You call it a cure, I call it extinction." Elena saw the device behind Isabella, a massive ring of lights and sensors glowing like an artificial halo. Its core pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "What does it do?" she asked Isabella, turned to her smiling coldly. "It transmits emotional stasis. It will rewrite the neural frequencies of anyone within 50 miles. No more pain, no more fear, no more love." Elena's heart pounded. "You'll destroy what makes people human." "That's the disease I'm healing," Isabella replied. "And he was supposed to help me." Damian's voice cut through the tension. "I did once, but now I finally understand why it failed. You can't kill emotion without killing the soul." He lunged for the control panel, but Isabella moved faster. She pressed a switch, and a surge of light filled the room. The machine roared alive, vibrating with unbearable power. Elena screamed for him to stop, but Damian didn't hesitate. He threw himself toward the main console, ripping cables out, sparks flying around him. The power overloaded the system. electricity bursting through the air. Isabella tried to reach the controls again, but Damian caught her arm, forcing her back. "You can't stop evolution," she cried. He looked at her with a strange, calm, "Then I'll stop time instead." He pulled the main power conduit free. A blinding flash filled the room. The explosion sent Elena flying against the glass wall. She felt heat shock, and then nothing but ringing silence. When she woke, the lab was gone. Half-destroyed fire alarms wailing. Damian lay beside her. Motionless, Isabella was nowhere to be seen. Elena crawled to him, trembling, his hand still warm, but his breathing shallow. His eyes fluttered open long enough to find hers. "It's over," he whispered. "She's gone. Don't leave me." She begged, tears mixing with the smoke around them. He smiled weakly, his voice fading. "You taught me how to feel again, Elena. Don't ever stop feeling." And as the sirens wailed and the city lights blurred through the shattered glass, she realized the truth. The man everyone said could never be with a woman had risked everything. Not for touch, not for passion, but for the one thing Isabella could never understand. The courage. To love. Smoke still curled over the ruins of the research tower long after the explosion. But the city below carried on, unaware that it had almost lost the essence of humanity itself. Elena stood beside the ambulance, her hands trembling as she watched. Paramedics load Damian's unconscious body onto a stretcher. His pulse was weak, his breathing shallow, yet still there. She had refused to leave his side since the blast. When they reached the hospital, the corridors smelled of antiseptic and fear. Every doctor who examined him said the same thing. His brain had absorbed an intense electrical surge. He should be dead, but somehow he was still fighting. Elena sat by his bed hour after hour, whispering to him, hoping that her voice would reach. Whatever part of him still listened. Days passed. The city's news channels blamed the explosion on a failed corporate experiment. No one mentioned Isabella. No one spoke of emotion manipulation or machines that could erase the soul. But Elena knew the truth, and so did Damian, even if he lay silent, trapped somewhere between dreams and reality. One night, while she dozed beside him, the heart monitor began to fluctuate wildly. The lines on the screen danced in erratic waves. She leapt up, pressing the call button. But before the nurses arrived, Damian's hand twitched. His eyes opened only for a second, and he whispered something she could barely hear, a single word that chilled her blood. "Isabella." Elena froze, staring at him. He wasn't fully conscious, yet his expression changed from peace to terror. His pulse raced, the monitors screaming in alarm. Then his body went still again, and the screens leveled out. Doctors rushed in, forcing her to leave the room. Standing outside, she pressed her, palms against the glass, watching him through tears. He was alive but haunted by something still unfinished. And in her heart, she knew Isabella's story wasn't over. 2 nights later, a power outage swept through the hospital. The emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows across the hallways. Elena rushed to Damian's room, only to find his bed empty. The sheets were still warm, but he was gone. Panic rose in her throat. She ran to the security station, where the cameras showed a figure, in a hospital gown, walking slowly toward the exit. Damian moving with purpose, his steps steady, not weak, not confused. She followed the trail out into the storm once again. Rain soaked her clothes as she climbed into a taxi, shouting for the driver to head toward the coast. She knew exactly where he was going. The Vale estate, the place where it all began. When she arrived, the mansion loomed in the darkness, lit only by flashes of lightning. The main doors were wide open, wind howling through the halls. She stepped inside, calling his name. Her voice echoed unanswered. Then she saw him standing in the same spot she had first found him by the mirror in his bedroom. He looked stronger, his eyes sharp again. But there was something else in them, something she couldn't read. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "You disappeared from the hospital. Damian, I thought you were dying." "I was," he said. And then I remembered her voice. I remembered everything. Isabella isn't gone. Elena. She transferred her consciousness into the system before the explosion. "She's inside me." Elena stared at him, disbelief twisting into fear. "That's impossible. She built a neural link between us when we worked on the prototype. She must have activated it at the last second when the lab exploded. I can hear her whispering every time I close my eyes. She wants control again." A sudden crack of thunder shook the walls. The mirror behind him rippled as though touched by unseen hands. The reflection shifted for an instant, showing not Damian, but Isabella's face, pale and cold, smiling back at Elena. "Damian," Elena whispered, stepping closer. "You can fight this." "I don't know if I can," he said, his voice breaking. "She's stronger every hour. The only way to stop her is to destroy the connection completely, and that means destroying me." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. "No, there has to be another way." He stepped forward, cupping her face, his touch trembling. "You saved me once by teaching me to feel. Now I need you to save me again by letting me go." Before she could answer, a gust of icy wind blew through the room. The lights flickered and the mirror shattered, sending shards flying around them. A cold voice filled the air. Not from Damian's mouth, but from everywhere at once. Isabella's voice. "You can't kill what's already become part of you. Damian." He screamed, clutching his head, pain tearing through him as blood dripped from his nose. Elena grabbed his shoulders, trying to hold him steady, but the air around them began to pulse with energy, the remnants of Isabella's system reawakening through him in desperation. Elena whispered, "Fight her, Damian. Remember what it felt. Like when I touched you the night you stopped pretending. Remember that it was real." His breathing hitched, his eyes flickering between darkness and light, and for a moment, his voice came back low and shaking. "Elena, if I don't survive this, promise me you'll destroy whatever she left behind." Lightning flashed the mansion, trembling as the storm raged harder. The energy built to a blinding flash, and then silence. Damian collapsed into her arms, unconscious, his body still, but his heart beating. When she looked up, the mirror was gone. Only the frame remained scorched at the edges. On the wall behind it, someone had carved a message into the plaster with trembling hands. 3 words that hadn't been there before. "I am awake." Elena's. Tears mixed with the rain as she held him tighter. Realizing the terrifying truth, Isabella wasn't haunting him anymore. She was becoming him. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It felt like the world itself was grieving. The mansion had grown colder. Since that night when the mirror shattered and Damian collapsed, Elena barely left his side, keeping vigil as the doctor she called from the mainland tended to his wounds. The man survived impossible things, but this time it was different. His pulse was strong, his body stable. Yet his eyes, when open, seemed divided between 2 worlds. Every night he whispered in his sleep, sometimes her name, sometimes Isabella's, and sometimes both fused into one haunting sound. The doctors said he needed rest, but Elena knew it wasn't rest. It was freedom. She spent hours reading Isabella's old journals, found hidden beneath the floorboards of the destroyed greenhouse. The pages were filled with formulas and equations, but also something darker. Fragments of thoughts that blurred between genius and madness. Emotion is a parasite. Love, a chemical illusion. If pain can be erased, control can be absolute. Elena realized Isabella's final experiment hadn't just merged data into Damian's brain. It had fused parts of her consciousness with his. There was still a piece of Isabella alive inside him, feeding on his emotions, waiting for the right moment to take over completely. Late that night, Elena sat by the fire. When Damian stirred, his voice was hoarse but calm. "You shouldn't stay here alone." She turned to him, her heart aching at the shadows under his eyes. "I'm not leaving you." He smiled faintly, but there was something wrong about it, too. Perfect, too cold. "That's what she used to say." Elena froze. "What do you mean?" "Isabella," he said. "She used to sit in this same chair and say those exact words before she poisoned my heart with her experiments." His tone sent chills through her, because for a moment, it didn't sound like Damian at all. It sounded like two voices speaking through one mouth, one tender the other, venomous. "Damian," she whispered, reaching for his hand, but he pulled away, his gaze darkening. "You shouldn't touch me, Elena, sometimes. I don't know if it's me you're touching anymore." Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating his face for a second, and in that instant she saw something that made her heart stop. His reflection in the glass was smiling, but his real face wasn't. The next morning she found the butler packing his things. He refused to meet her eyes. "Miss Rivera, the master told me to leave. He said the house will be unsafe soon. I advise you to do the same." "What did he mean, unsafe?" she asked. But the man only shook his head, muttering a prayer, before disappearing into the storm. By afternoon, the house was empty, except for her and Damian. She found him in the study, staring at the fire, his fingers tracing the edge of a small black notebook. She realized it was Isabella's final research log. "I found a way to end this," he said, without looking up. "There's a final entry." She left coordinates the place where she tested the backup core. "It's buried beneath the cliffs near the lighthouse. If we destroy it, she goes with it." Elena stepped closer, cautious. "And if it's a trap, he..." Finally looked up, his eyes clearer than they'd been in days. "Then I'll face her one last time. I'd rather die my own man than live as her echo." As night fell, they drove toward the cliffs, wind howling rain striking the windshield like shards of glass. The lighthouse loomed ahead, its beam slicing through the darkness. The closer they came, the stronger the hum in the air grew like electricity, whispering through the bones of the earth. They found a hidden hatch buried in the rocks, leading down a spiral staircase that descended into a cavern lined with old machinery. The hum grew louder as they reached the chamber where a massive heart-shaped generator pulsed, faint blue light illuminating the words carved above it. "Emotion, 0 prototype." Damian's expression hardened. "This is it." Elena reached out to stop him. "If you destroy it, what happens to you?" He looked at her, the stormlight flickering across his face. "If she's truly inside me, then destroying it will destroy that connection too. But I don't know if I'll survive." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "You can't do this alone." He smiled faintly. The real Damian breaking through for a heartbeat. "You once said you'd teach me how to feel without burning. Maybe this is how I prove I learned." Before she could stop him, he stepped toward the core. The machinery around them came alive, screens flickering, Isabella's face appearing in fractured static. "You can't kill me. Damian, I live in every heartbeat you ever felt," Damian shouted over the roar. "Then feel this," and drove his hand against the control panel. Sparks exploding through the air. The generator wailed a deep metallic scream as power surged through, him light spilling from his eyes like fire. Elena ran forward, grabbing his arm, screaming his name. But the force threw her back. She hit the ground hard, her vision blurring. Through the haze, she saw him standing in the center of the storm of light, the air around him vibrating between life and death. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. The chamber fell silent, the hum gone. The only sound was her own breath, and the distant echo of waves crashing above. Elena crawled to him, trembling. His body lay still on the floor, eyes closed, face peaceful. She pressed her ear to his chest for one agonizing second. Nothing. Then a heartbeat steady, strong, alive. She broke into tears, whispering his name. He opened his eyes, slowly looking at her. Not with confusion this time, but clarity. "It's over," he said weakly. She smiled through her tears. "You did it, you're free." He looked toward the broken machine and whispered, "No, Elena, we're free." But as she helped him stand, she didn't see the faint flicker of blue light that pulsed one last time from the shattered core, or the quiet voice that whispered through the speakers just before it died, "Freedom is only the first illusion." The sea was calm again when they returned to the surface. But the air around the cliffs felt different, heavier, as if the world itself knew something had changed. Damian was alive, yet quieter than ever. The color had returned to his eyes, but there was something distant behind them. Something she couldn't name. Elena drove them back to the mansion in silence while the morning sun fought through the fog, turning the ocean silver. When they stepped inside, the house felt warmer, the fire crackling in the study as if it had been waiting for them. The scent of salt and smoke clung to their clothes. Damian sank into the chair by the fireplace, staring into the flames, his expression unreadable. Elena stood behind him, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. "You're free now," she said, softly. "It's over." He didn't look at her. "Freedom feels strange when you've lived as someone else for so long. You're not her Damian. You proved that down there." He gave a small laugh, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Then, why do I remember her thoughts as if they're my own? Why do I see things I shouldn't know?" Elena moved closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Because you absorbed part of her mind when you destroyed that machine. But it doesn't control you. It's just memory." He turned to her, then his gaze sharp. "Are you sure it's memory that speaks to me at night? It's her voice whispering things only she could know." Before she could answer, the lights flickered once, then twice before. The power died completely, plunging the mansion into darkness. The wind outside rose, suddenly slamming the shutters against the windows. Elena's pulse raced as she grabbed a candle from the table, lighting it quickly. "Stay here. I'll check the generator," she said. But Damian's hand caught her wrist. "No, wait," he whispered. "Listen." Through the silence came a faint sound from somewhere deep within the walls. It wasn't wind or rain. It was laughter, low, soft, chilling, familiar. Elena's breath caught. "No, that's not possible." Damian rose slowly, his face pale. "I destroyed her, Elena. I felt it. I watched her fade. Then what is that?" He moved toward the hallway, his footsteps slow, the candlelight flickering over his face. The laughter came again, closer this time. A woman's voice whispering through the air. "You can't destroy what you carry inside you." Elena's heart pounded. She followed him down the corridor where the sound led them to the forbidden wing. The door, slightly open though they had sealed it weeks ago. Damian hesitated, then pushed it open. The room beyond was different. The debris gone, the walls clean, the machines restored. It looked exactly as it had before the fire. The smell of flowers filled, the air too sweet, too unnatural. "Damian," Elena whispered. "This isn't real." He stepped forward as if drawn by invisible hands. "It's a memory projection from her mind. It's showing me what she wants me to see." Then the lights in the room flared, and Isabella stood before them, wearing the same white coat, her eyes glowing faint blue. "You really thought destroying a machine could kill an idea," she said, smiling. I am beyond wires, beyond flesh, beyond death. Damian's voice trembled. You're not real. Neither is guilt, she answered. Yet it controls you. Elena stepped between them. You're nothing but a remnant, a shadow. You don't belong here. Isabella's gaze turned to her cold and sharp, and you do. You replaced me in his heart. You taught him to feel what I erased. You infected him with weakness. Before Elena could speak, the floor shuddered. The machines around them roared to life, their lights flickering faster. Damian clutched his, head pain surging through him. She's trying to take control again, he gasped. Elena grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. Fight her, Damian. Remember who you are. Remember what's real. He struggled, his eyes flickering between blue and brown. She's inside me. She's pulling me under. Then pull back, Elena shouted. Pull her into the light. She can't survive there. Damian screamed, the room shaking violently, glass shattering around them. The machines exploded, one after another, flooding the air with smoke and sparks. Through the chaos, Isabella's form flickered, fading in and out, her face twisting in fury. You can't win, she cried. You and I are the same. No. Damian roared, his voice echoing, like thunder. You are what I was. I am what you tried to kill. He tore free from her grasp, a wave of energy bursting from him, the walls cracking under the force. The light consumed the room, blinding Elena for a moment. When it cleared, the machines were gone. And so was Isabella. Damian collapsed to his knees, breathing hard sweat and blood streaking his face. Elena ran to him, holding him tightly. He looked up at her, eyes filled with exhaustion and disbelief. She's gone, he whispered. Elena shook her head. No, Damian, look. On the far wall where Isabella had stood, her shadow remained burned into the plaster, its outline faintly glowing like a scar of light. As they watched, the glow faded slowly, but the faint whisper of her voice drifted through the air one last time. You may have won the body, Damian, but the heart always remembers the ghost that built it. Outside, thunder rolled across the sea again, and Elena knew deep down this was not the end of Isabella's presence. It was only the calm before the storm that would decide whether Damian Vale would remain the man she loved or become the legacy of the woman who refused to die. The mansion stood in eerie silence after that night, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and sea salt. Damian had not spoken in days. He spent hours by the window staring at the horizon, as though waiting for the ocean to bring back something it had taken. Elena tried to pretend everything was normal, but she could feel the difference in him. His movements were slower, his words quieter, his presence more distant, like a man living between two worlds. The shadow Isabella left on the wall had finally faded, but Elena still felt her presence in small things. The flicker of lights, the whisper of a voice in the hallway, the way Damian's reflection sometimes lingered in mirrors a moment too long. She told herself it was trauma, but deep down she knew Isabella's energy was not gone. It was hiding. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, Damian finally spoke. Do you believe a soul can be divided? Elena turned from the window, his question catching her off guard. I believe a soul can be scarred but not divided. He nodded slowly. Then maybe I am the scar. She moved closer, kneeling in front of him, taking his hands. You survived everything because of your heart, not because of her machine. You are not her creation. Damian, you're human. He smiled faintly, but his eyes were distant. What if part of me doesn't want to be? Before she could answer, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness. The fire in the hearth flared without warning, casting strange blue light instead of orange. Damian stiffened, his breathing shallow. The air grew cold. A voice rose from the flames, soft, almost tender. You really thought I would fade so easily. Damian. Elena's heart stopped. The fire twisted into a shape, the faint image of Isabella, her face calm and glowing, her eyes alive with an unnatural light. Damian rose to his feet, his jaw tightening. You're not real. Reality is perception, she said, her tone eerily calm. And perception still remembers me. Elena stepped in front of him, shouting, You lost Isabella. You don't belong here anymore. Isabella's form flickered, her voice growing sharper. You can't erase what's inside him. I am his design. I live in every breath he takes, every heartbeat, every thought. You can destroy me only by destroying him. Damian grabbed a poker from the fire pit and drove it into the flames. The light exploded around them, Isabella's figure screaming before vanishing into smoke, but the explosion threw him backward against the floor. Elena rushed to his side, his body trembling violently, as if something inside him was tearing free. He clutched his head, his voice breaking. She's inside my mind trying to fuse again. I can't hold her back much longer. Elena grabbed his face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Listen to me, Damian. You are stronger than her. She's not your creator. She's your ghost. You control what lives in you, not her. His breathing grew, ragged, but he nodded, his eyes burning with fierce determination. Then it ends tonight. He stumbled to his desk, pulling open a drawer, revealing a small silver device she had never seen before. Before the last experiment, I built a fail-safe. If anything ever went wrong, it could erase the neural signature left by her. But it might erase my memories, too. Maybe more. Elena's hands shook. No, there has to be another way you'll lose everything. He met her eyes, and for the first time, in months, she saw peace. I already lost everything. Once I won't lose you, too. Before she could stop him, he activated the device, pressing it to his temple. A burst of white light filled the room, the sound like thunder, cracking the world apart. He collapsed into her arms, unconscious, the device falling to the floor, smoking. Elena held him, sobbing, calling his name, until finally his eyes opened again. But when he looked at her, there was no recognition, only quiet confusion. Who are you? He whispered. Her heart shattered, but she forced a trembling smile. I'm the one who promised to help you heal. He blinked slowly, as though trying to remember something far away. Then why do I feel like I've known you forever? She brushed his hair back from his forehead, whispering, Because you have. Weeks passed. Damian recovered, but the memories never returned. He moved through the house as if seeing it for the first time, every corner familiar yet strange. Sometimes when he passed her in the hall, he would pause, looking at her with a flicker of something unspoken, as if his soul remembered what his mind could not. One evening, as they walked along the cliffs, he stopped watching the sunset. I keep dreaming of fire and water, he said quietly, and of someone who wouldn't let me fall. Do you think dreams can come from another life? Elena smiled softly, her eyes glistening. Maybe they come from the part of us that refuses to forget. He looked at her for a long moment, and then, without thinking, he reached out, taking her hand. When I'm near you, it feels like the world finally makes sense. I don't know why, but I don't want to lose that. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, Then don't. He leaned in and kissed her gently, the ocean wind swirling around them, carrying away the last trace of smoke from the mansion. Behind them, the fire in the hearth flickered one last time, before dying completely. Far beneath the cliffs, in the shattered lab, a single blue spark pulsed faintly once before fading into silence, as if finally letting go. Elena closed her eyes against the sea breeze, whispering a silent promise that love, no matter how broken, could never be erased. Not by fire, not by science, not even by death, And for the first time since the night she entered the mansion, she felt the storm within finally rest.